most people are treating interview prep as this last minute task. Job searching is a skill set, and interviews is part of that skill set. So if it is not something that you have dedicated time intentionally developing your skill set, now is the time to dig into it, really build out that skill so that with every single next interview, you sit down for those couple of hours and then you're ready to go. Today, we're talking about job interviews and specifically how long your prep for your interviews should be. What I have discovered over the years of coaching is that most people under prepare for job interviews. And let me say this right away. If you're preparing 2 days before, the night before, this is not enough. And that is the main reason you're not converting interviews into offers. The reality is that most people are treating interview prep as this last minute task. You might have heard me talk about this before. Job searching is a skill set, and interviews is part of that skill set. So if it is not something that you have dedicated time intentionally developing your skill set, now is the time to dig into it. So in this episode, we're going to talk about what it really means and looks like to develop that interview skill set. I will really show you what our clients do to prepare. And then once you have developed the skill set, what your interview prep and approach would look like so that it's never this big thing that is taking over your life. So let's dive into it. Now, first, I want to start by saying that your interview prep time really depends on your starting point. So if you haven't interviewed in a long time, we recently had 2 new clients join who have been with the same company or had been with the same company for 15 years before they got recently laid off. So they have not interviewed in over a decade. So it would most probably take them longer to get to the level that they need to be at. If you are getting interviews right now, but you only get that first screening round and then you're not moving forward, again, it will take you longer. If also it's something that you're dreading, that you freeze, that you're crumbling under pressure, again, you will need to dedicate more time. And specifically dedicating the time to developing the skill set, not just preparing for that one interview that's coming up. But if you're someone who is going to, let's say, the final rounds right now consistently, you probably just need some refinement, so your prep may be shorter. So the reality is that not everyone needs the same amount of prep, but almost everyone needs more prep than they think. Now, something that a lot of people don't realize is that your interview prep should ideally start before you even have an interview. For example, with our clients, we start interview prep and ongoing practice multiple times a week in the first month of them working with us, no matter where they are in their journey. Of course, if they're already interviewing right in that week that they're joining us, we begin with interview prep and we really do a crash course on it together. But if they come in the very beginning of their journey and maybe they're still looking for clarity to really first narrow down what's next, even then they begin ongoing interview practice within the first 30 days. What I tell them is that they must be in the best peak interview shape of their life by the time they get that interview, because you work so hard to get that interview, you cannot afford to miss out on that opportunity because you haven't really started building out that skill. So they get to the point that when they're actively job searching, if I wake them up in the middle of the night, they're ready to go before they even get an interview. Just imagine that by the time they have an interview, how much better they're prepared than pretty much everyone else. All right, so how do they prepare? How do they practice? Let's really break that down. Number one is that they build a foundation first. So let me show you what this foundation means. And something also important to understand with this foundation is that you only need to build this foundation once. You really don't need to dedicate that much time to interview practice every single time you're job searching. Only this one time to build the foundation, to really develop the skill set so that with every interview, whether it's now or in the future, you're just fine tuning, looking at your stories, refreshing them, adding maybe a couple more, and then you're ready to go within a couple of hours. But you really need to build out that foundation. And if you have not done this proactively, intentionally before, start today. So what does the foundation really look like? So here is specifically what our clients learn and focus on, even again, before they have an interview. So number one, they learn the concept of an interview alignment plan. So that is something that they build for every opportunity once they are actually interviewing for it, but they need to know and understand what it really is ahead of time so that when they are interviewing and when the interview comes up, it's really fast for them to build a plan. So what is an interview alignment plan? So I teach our clients how to look at employers' priorities, then how to map out their own experience and their own stories so that they know exactly the specific stories and examples that they have to share that correspond to those 3 top priorities for the employer. So they're going in with a plan of whatever happens of exactly what they need to cover. Now, because they're so focused on the employer's priorities and they're so intentional about them, they now know with every single answer, every single question that they get, they know to connect their story, their answer to their priority. With the interview alignment plan, we also look at objections, meaning we proactively think about the objections that that employer will have to hiring you. So an objection is typically something about that's missing in your experience or skill set that is important for this role. I actually did a full podcast episode on it, on how to understand what those objections are, how to think about them, how to proactively prepare for them. I believe it is episode number 30. So if you have not listened to it, make sure that you go ahead and do that right after this episode. But in short, when it comes to objections, it's not just thinking about, oh, what am I going to say if they ask me if I have ever worked with this technology or this client. It's preparing for this ahead of time. So you are actually addressing the objection as early as in your tell me about yourself. And again, it doesn't mean that you're saying that, hey, I don't have this experience, but you're highlighting what you do have that really does help to overcome that objection, that you have that relevant experience and relevant skill set. So that's kind of foundational piece number one. The second foundational piece is building out what we call an interview story bank. So I teach our clients how to look at all the possible questions and how to break them into categories. In fact, it's already broken down for them into categories. So they know that they need to have 2 to 3 stories / examples for every single category. Now, it doesn't mean that you need 30 or 50 stories. A lot of these stories can actually work for multiple categories, which again, I teach how to do. But the point is that they never have to come up with a story, come up with an example under pressure. They have already planned for it and they practiced, which we'll talk about in a few minutes. Now, the third piece here is core frameworks. So we have our own proprietary frameworks for all the questions from tell me about yourself, why this role, why this company, behavioral questions, situational questions. So they really understand how to structure every single story. And the goal with those frameworks is that either their examples are very concise, on point, they're really action and result focused, but B is even if they do ever get a question that they did not prepare for, they can easily, because they've been practicing these frameworks so many times, they can easily plug in the story or the example that they just thought of into that framework. And by the way, side note, I really do not like the STAR framework for interview stories that you see everywhere. I just find that we finish with the result. So the R in STAR, right, is the result. So you need to listen to the story for 2, 3, 4, 5 minutes to get to the bottom line. And you always have to start actually with the bottom line, right? You don't want an executive to listen to you for 5 minutes to wait for the actual answer that they're looking for. The other reason I don't like the STAR formula is because the S and the T, so the situation and the task, are not that important. But we are really starting and really focusing on that for the first minute, 2 minutes of your answer. And those are not very relevant. So I do believe that that needs to be a lot more concise as well. So we teach our own frameworks. And something also really cool that we have is we've built our own GPT that knows those frameworks. So you can easily plug in your resume or tell a story in your own words without really thinking through it. And it allows you to plug it into the framework so you can really build out that story bank and have every single story plugged into the framework very quickly. So really, this is the foundation that they build. So they understand what the interview alignment plan is. They think through their entire experience to create that interview story bank. And then for each story, they learn and plug it into the frameworks. So this is the foundational work that they do and you should do before you even have an interview. But this is not all. This is really just the beginning because now you need to practice. You really need to have these stories kind of in your bones so that in the moment, you're not thinking about what to say, what's the next point, what's the next number that comes in that story. You already know it, so you can be confident, present, you can kind of have fun with it, and it just comes across really at a whole other level when you have had enough practice and also enough feedback. So I'm going to share exactly how our clients practice. So inside our Star Canada program, our clients practice in 3 ways. Number 1, they do solo practice. So those stories that they've plugged into the framework, they say them out loud, and I get them to record themselves on video, on audio, and then listen to themselves, watch themselves, because they really start seeing their body language, their delivery. So that's a big piece in getting better, but also, once again, getting those stories in your bones. So getting really, really comfortable with the content. Solo practice inside our program can also look like practicing with another AI tool that I've built where it talks to them. So it's a Speak GPT that interviews them for a specific role. So it feels a lot more kind of like a mock interview, but it really, again, allows you to practice saying those stories out loud. The second way they practice is with peers in the community. So these are other senior professionals who also have learned and been studying and practicing all of the same frameworks. And there is so much power. I cannot stress this enough. There is so much power in this type of practice. And typically they would meet for an hour, 30 minutes. It's one person interviewing the other, and then they swap. And hearing someone else deliver stories in those same frameworks gives you so much context for why we're doing what we're doing, why those frameworks exist. You can really see, oh, this is how much detail we need to go into for the other person to really understand it. Or, oh, you really didn't tie it to what's important to the employer. And now that you're listening to someone else, you can hear it that, oh, that's really missing here. So you don't forget it yourself. So there is so much value in hearing someone else. And also what some of our clients tell me when they meet with each other is, oh, it gives me perspective if someone has been practicing for a month longer, that, oh, this is where I need to be. Now I know the level that I'm trying to get to. But then also it gives you feedback from real humans and different types of humans on your own delivery and your own body language and your own stories. And finally, the third way they practice is with one of our coaches. So what I typically actually tell our clients is that you don't book your first mock with a coach until you have built out a good number of your stories already, and you have done practice solo, and you have done practice with others in the community, so that you're coming in a pretty good shape already. So we're not really focusing on the foundations, but also it's not the night before your interview, because trust me, and I actually hear this often, someone would reach out to me, hey, I have an interview tomorrow. Can someone do, a mock practice with me? And honestly, realistically, it's a little too late. Like, we can give you some pointers, but here how we've just been talking about this foundation and this practice, you really cannot do this the night before. So when our clients meet with a coach, the goal is that they have done enough practice And this way we can really identify patterns, whether it's their delivery, whether it's the specifics of their stories, maybe they're going into too much detail or not enough detail. And this way they have time before they actually have the interview to really work on that and polish that. And oftentimes, to be honest, guys, it is the delivery. Oftentimes people speak too fast or too slow, or they need to add more energy into their answers. That is not going to happen overnight. That will take a few weeks for you to get there. And the biggest difference that we see is when you have been doing your own practice, then you do a session with a coach, we give you feedback, and then you come back 2 or 3 weeks later. That's when we see the biggest difference. That you've been implementing that feedback, doing more practice, and then you go for your actual interview, and then you're a whole other person from where you started. And depending on our client's starting point, depending on their schedule, whether they're working full time or they've been laid off, depending on how fast they want to go, we give them a target of how much practice we want for them to do every single week. But the minimum that I give everyone is 2 times a week. So 1 time is your solo practice for those stories, and at least 1 time a week you want to do peer practice. And we tell them that this is ongoing, starting the first month in the program, and then the entire time you're job searching, this practice maintains and stays on your calendar, whether you're interviewing or not. And I hope you're hearing that this is very different than doing this the night before. We recently had Diana on the podcast, one of our clients. It is episode 49, I believe. So if you haven't listened to it, make sure that you do, because she has talked about her approach and her story. So she got a multi-6-figure VP role with one of the leading financial institutions. And she knew that the role was coming up. I believe she found out in September by meeting the hiring manager, but she didn't actually start interviewing until November. That whole time, she was practicing. She was preparing for the interview 2 months before she even had the interview. She just knew that it was coming up. And in the interview with her, she talked about how she had a goal of practicing 2 hours a day. 2 hours a day. I'm not saying you have to practice 2 hours a day, but she knew that was her weak point, that she really needed to elevate her game. And this is what you're competing against. Now, what is very, very important to hear is that you don't have to do this level of prep and practice every single time you're job searching. You only really need this level, this really, really deep level, once. I did this once a decade ago, once I understood that this is what it's requiring me to do to really build out the story bank and practice it. And I did hundreds of mock interviews, really learning the skill set and learning my stories and practicing my deliveries. So I got really, really good at it. Now, every single time I had to interview in the decade following, what I would do, I would open my story bank. I would look at the stories that I already have, that I have already practiced. It would take me an hour, maybe even less, to refresh my memory. I would spend a little bit of time adding new stories since I had more experience. And I would spend a little bit of time just tweaking the stories slightly so that they're really connected to the specific role that I'm interviewing, because I teach our clients that every single story needs to connect to what matters to the employer. So that will be different for every interview, but it takes a couple of minutes to tweak that and to think about this proactively in every story rather than developing the whole system and the skill set every single time. So it took me one summer. I kind of dedicated a full summer to this a decade ago, and I really, really developed this skill. So every time I had to interview again, A, I loved interviews, but B, it really took me a few hours to prep at that point because I had the skill set, because I had the foundation. I just needed to refresh it, get back into shape, and then I was ready to go. So if you have never dedicated time to really building out the skill set, you have to do it right now. This time that you're job searching, you do need to dedicate time and effort to learning and growing the skill so that you actually get this role right now and it's never a problem again. So friends, if you are preparing for interviews, especially for senior roles right now, and you do it the night before, 2 nights before, you're not doing enough. And also, what I want you to think about is if you have been getting interviews, but not converting them, but you're using the same approach, the same stories, what does that tell you? It tells you that your stories and your prep and your delivery and your positioning are not where they need to be. So you really need to hone in on the skill set. So don't wait for the interview to start your prep and practice. Build this skill early and practice, practice, practice before the pressure is on. So when the interview comes up, you only need that one night before or 2 nights before to really sharpen for that specific opportunity. All right, and before we wrap up, a reminder that if you're listening to this and you're job searching and you're realizing, wow, okay, I really need to build my job search skill set. I really need help. I really need to make sure that I'm maximizing every single opportunity. And I'm not only converting interviews into offers right now, so I don't just land this one role right now, but this is not a problem ever again. You're in the right place. Make sure that you book a call with my team. We'll link it in the show notes down below. On that call, we'll talk about you, your goals, your challenges specifically with your job search. So where is it that you're getting stuck right now? And specifically how we can help you. All right, that is it for today. We'll talk to you very soon.